So I want you to just imagine sitting in a room for a second, just, an ordinary, everyday room.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right. And you're
Yeah.
trying to have a conversation. But I want you to imagine that the low, steady hum of the HVAC system right above your head is suddenly demanding your attention, like aggressively demanding it.
Oh, wow, that'd be distracting.
And at the exact same time, there's this sudden sharp scrape of a chair leg across the floor. And that commands your focus too. Plus, there's the crinkling rustle of someone opening a bag of chips, maybe like 3 rows away from you,
Right, right,
and a totally muffled conversation happening entirely down the hall.
right.
Now, imagine that every single one of those sounds is registering in your brain with the exact same inescapable intensity as the actual person speaking directly into your face.
I mean, that is just a profoundly overwhelming image when you really sit with it for a minute.
Yeah, it is.
Because what you're describing, it completely strips away the entire concept of background noise. Like, for the person sitting in that room, there is literally no background.
Right, it's all just there.
Exactly. Everything is in the foreground, all at once.
Right.
And your brain is treating everything as an urgent top-tier priority.
And, well, that reality is exactly the focus of today's deep dive. We are looking at this really original, honestly profoundly illuminating article by Dr. Jaime Hoerricks. That's pronounced J-A-E, by the way.
Yes, great piece of writing.
Truly. It's titled The Sound of Silence, Navigating Autistic Auditory Overload. And our mission today is basically to completely shatter this really common misconception that auditory overload is just, about things being too loud.
Which is such an important distinction to make right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're going to look at the mechanics of how sound actually governs a person's fundamental ability to access language, like how it controls whether they can even speak.
Right, because we almost always default to volume as the primary metric for auditory discomfort, right? Like, if something's bothering us, we just, I don't know, turn it down.
Yeah, exactly. Too loud, make it quiet.
Right. But the reality presented here points us toward this much more complex structural understanding of how the nervous system actually interacts with the environment.
So true. And the tone for this is set right away in the text with this really poignant concept of the first autistic person.
Oh, yeah, that part was striking.
It really is, because it's not framed in this, celebratory or inspirational sense. It's not about the first autistic person to win some major award or break a world record.
Right. It's about the ordinary firsts.
Exactly. The impossible, completely ordinary first. Like the first autistic person to have a totally uneventful trip to the mall. Or the first to actually hear only one thing at a time.
It completely reframes the baseline of what we even consider a successful day.
Right.
Because we naturally just assume that environments become difficult for autistic individuals because the decibel level gets too high.
Right. The volume goes up.
Exactly. But the core revelation Dr. Hoerricks brings up pivots away from that entirely. The difficulty isn't loudness, it's multiplicity.
Multiplicity. Okay, let's unpack this for a second. How does that actually break down in terms of everyday communication? Because, normally I just think, well, I speak, you hear me, you reply.
Right. Society views communication as this one continuous, unbroken chain.
Just a straight line.
Exactly. The assumption is, if I heard you, I processed you. If I processed you, I understood you. And if I understood you, I can answer.
Yeah, that's definitely how it feels to most people.
Right. We treat it as a single fluid physiological event. But under severe auditory load, those are totally separate, distinct events.
Huh. Completely disconnected.
Yeah. Sound doesn't just cleanly enter the ear and immediately become meaning. It enters, it layers, and it actively competes for limited biological resources.
Okay, so it's not a fluid pipe at all. That sounds almost like a computer CPU struggling to keep up.
Oh, that's actually a highly accurate way to visualize it. How so, do you mean?
Well, think about what happens if you open, 50 really heavy software applications on an old laptop at the exact same time.
Oh, yeah, the fan starts whirring.
Right. The fan goes crazy, and then the mouse cursor just totally freezes on the screen. The computer isn't, refusing to work. It's not actively ignoring your frantic clicking.
Right, it's just overwhelmed.
Exactly. It simply has absolutely zero processing power left to register any new input. So is that essentially what Dr. Hoerricks means when she talks about this? Because she says she isn't somewhere else, but rather she is in the room more than the room could bear.
Yes, that is exactly it. The system is utterly saturated. The voice doesn't vanish because of a lack of things to say. It vanishes because the internal system that is supposed to, turn a thought or a need into actual speech is being completely hijacked for pure survival.
Wow, hijacked for survival. That is
It
intense.
really is. The brain has to sort every single incoming sound. It has to locate its origin, prioritize it,
Figure out if it's a threat?
exactly, separate it from all the overlapping noise, and then hold it in working memory long enough to attach it to some sort of context. That takes immense, exhausting processing power.
Which makes total sense when you look at the specific details in the text. I mean, there's the person speaking in front of you, sure. But there's also, like she points out, the machine breathing inside the wall.
Yes, the HVAC or the plumbing.
Right. And there are the shoes crossing the floor down the hall. There is this one mention of, quote, the small electric hum that nobody else had given permission to exist. That line really stuck with me.
It's beautifully written.
It really got me thinking about how unconsensual the physical world is. Like, you don't agree to hear the humming, it's just forced on you.
That is a great way to put it. Nothing stays in the background. One sound triggers a memory, right? Another demands a startled response. Another requires you to physically orient yourself.
It's just constant data.
It is. And by the time someone has actually asked a direct question to your face, the sheer data load of the hallway and that scraping chair have already consumed all that available CPU power you mentioned.
But because this freeze-up happens entirely internally, right, inside the brain, there's basically no visible sign of the struggle on the outside.
And that invisibility is exactly what creates the friction with the rest of the world. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at this concept of auditory architecture.
Auditory architecture. Okay, what does that look like in practice?
Well, the places we navigate every single day, right? Things like shopping malls, restaurants with those hard tile floors and exposed industrial ceilings, school gymnasiums.
School assemblies are the worst.
Right. These aren't neutral spaces. They're built environments. They're physically arranged in a specific way that reflects sound relentlessly.
Just bouncing everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're generally tolerated only by the people whose nervous systems aren't actively injured by them. It's an invisible injury.
So what does this all mean practically? I kind of want to push back on this for a second, just to play devil's advocate, because I feel like this is where the major societal disconnect happens.
Go for it.
If I'm a teacher in that school assembly, or maybe a manager in an open plan office, I look around and I see a perfectly safe room.
Right. Visually, yes.
Right. There's no broken glass on the floor. There's no fire alarm going off. There's no physical danger. And if the environment looks safe, it's really hard for people to understand why someone can't just, pay attention or fix their attitude. Society just expects that speech should remain perfectly available.
And when speech isn't available in those seemingly safe spaces, society immediately misdiagnoses the delay.
Because they don't see the fire.
Exactly. We
Yep.
tend to label it as a behavioral issue. And this is really where the hypoauditory side of this sensory weather comes into play.
Wait, let's pause there for a second. Hypoauditory, meaning like a reduced sensitivity to sound.
Yes.
But how does that work if the entire problem we're discussing is that they are hearing way too much? That sounds like the opposite.
It is a total paradox, I know. But it makes physiological sense when you break down the mechanics, because the brain is receiving a hyper amount of input.
All the overlapping streams.
Right, all those competing data streams from that architectural echo chamber. The system bottlenecks. So as a self-defense mechanism, the processing just slows down or shuts down completely.
Wow.
So the outward result looks hypoauditory. Literally looks like the person isn't hearing anything at all.
Ah, I see. So the input is cranked to like 150%, but the output basically drops to 0.
Precisely. The sound waves are physically hitting the eardrum, right? The mechanics of the ear are working.
Mm-hmm.
But the meaning reaches the conscious mind in delayed, fragmented pieces.
So an instruction from a teacher just gets completely missed.
Yes. Or a name is registered a few seconds too late. The meaning only fully assembles in their brain after the socially acceptable window to respond has already closed.
And because everyday people don't see that internal bottleneck happening, they just judge the external silence.
They absolutely do. The diagnostic language we use socially completely fails here. People call it a weakness when the actual biological event is an overwhelming neurological load.
Right. They say, oh, they're just being rude.
Exactly. They call it rudeness or an attitude problem when the actual event is a severe processing delay. They view it as this stubborn refusal to participate.
When really it's an involuntary loss of access.
Exactly, a total loss of access to language.
Man, that has to be incredibly isolating. Think about it. You're standing in a mall, and the literal architecture of the building is assaulting your nervous system.
It's a barrage.
You've got, pop music dropping from overhead speakers, voices bouncing off the hard surfaces from literally 360 degrees, shopping carts rattling, hangers scraping on metal clothing racks.
It's relentless.
A relentless, multi-directional wave of data. And yet, the person standing right in the middle of it, whose brain is fighting just to sort the noise and survive, is told that they are the one being difficult.
It's tragic, honestly. It stems from this false assumption that everyone's internal processing chain operates on the exact same time signature.
Which we know isn't true.
Right. When someone experiencing this looks like they are ignoring you, they are actually desperately waiting for those chaotic sound waves to coalesce into recognizable language.
You're just trying to catch up to what was said 5 seconds ago.
Yes. They might finally process and answer the previous question you asked, entirely missing your current question, simply because it functionally hasn't arrived in their processing center yet.
That brings up something from the text that initially seemed like a massive contradiction to me when I first read it.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, if the chaotic noise of a mall or a staff room is that destructive and that draining, why would Dr. Hoerricks listen to liquid drum and bass music at full volume while working?
It's the classic question.
Right. How can someone whose system freezes up from the tiny hum of an HVAC unit voluntarily blast heavy, fast electronic music directly into their ears?
It completely baffles people from the outside looking in. They ask, how can you tolerate blaring music when a quiet staff room is just too much?
It seems backward.
But it isn't a contradiction at all when you look at the mechanics of it. It all comes down to sensory specificity.
Sensory specificity, meaning what exactly?
Well, the nervous system doesn't just passively detect whether a sound exists or just measure how loud it is. It critically evaluates what the sound actually does to the body. Does it gather your attention or does it scatter it?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. What the sound does, if I'm trying to visualize the difference here, is the unchosen noise of a mall kind of like, I don't know, standing in a pitch black room while people just throw things at you, like tennis balls just flying at you from every direction.
Oh, that is a fantastic way to look at it, especially because of the element of surprise.
Right, you never know when the next one is hitting.
Exactly. Every single impact in that dark room demands a sudden shift in your balance.
Yeah.
It demands a flinch. It drains your physical energy because you absolutely cannot predict when or where the next hit is coming from.
Right, you're constantly bracing for impact. It's exhausting. But the chosen noise, the really loud drum and bass music, what is the mechanism there? Is it acting like a shield against the tennis balls?
It acts a little less like a shield and more like a train track.
A track. Okay, explain that.
Well, a mall scatters your attention, right? It's 100 different, completely unpredictable claims on your bandwidth. Sentences cutting across other sentences, alarms chirping, sudden footsteps.
Just chaos.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
But a drum and bass track, despite the high volume, has a highly predictable beat. It has a defined harmonic structure. It literally gives the mind a smooth, predictable rail to run on.
Ah, so the predictability is the actual key here.
Yes, chosen sound is patterned, it is coherent, and most importantly, the music does not require you to formulate a social response to it.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's not demanding anything from you.
Right. It isn't asking you a question that you have to decode and then answer out loud. So by filling up the auditory processing bandwidth with a single, massive, but perfectly predictable structure, it actually blocks out those random, scattering demands of the outside world.
It keeps the processing power focused and contained, so it actually prevents the chaotic invasion of those other demands.
Exactly. It holds the body in a steady time signature instead of forcing it to constantly react to random, terrifying stimuli.
Which naturally leads into how someone navigates spaces where they can't, just blast their own drum and bass music out loud.
Right, the real world.
The text details some specific tools used to survive these unchosen environments, specifically wearing loops, which are a brand of earplugs, and using text captions on screens. But it's fascinating how these tools are described. They aren't solutions. They have very hard limits.
They do. They are absolutely crucial for basic access, but we really have to understand the mechanics of why they aren't magic cures.
Right, because my first thought was honestly, well, if the noise is the problem, earplugs solve it, right? Problem fixed.
That's what most people think.
But the text says loops just, quote, take the edge off the blade. They physically attenuate certain frequencies, so maybe dulling the sharpest, highest pitch startle triggers.
Which is helpful.
Yeah, it makes a space survivable for a little bit longer. But They don't fundamentally change the architecture of the room. They don't magically merge 50 competing voices into one easy-to-process data stream.
No, they don't. The sheer volume of different data streams is still entering the brain. It's just coming in at a slightly muffled volume.
It's still 50 voices.
Exactly. And the same limitation really applies to captions, too. Providing a visual text option gives speech a sort of second body.
A second body. I like that.
Yeah, it provides a visual anchor when the auditory environment is just too delayed or too unreliable to process. But relying on captions doesn't stop the multi-speaker environment from physically draining you.
Because your brain is still in the room doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. You are still fatiguing your nervous system by rapidly having to ignore the chaotic sound, then translate the visual text into meaning, and then formulate a response, all while the room continues to assault you with noise.
Wow.
You can successfully read the words on a screen and still be fundamentally injured by the auditory environment you are sitting in.
So the body is still footing the physiological bill for simply existing in that space no matter what tools you use.
Precisely. The cost doesn't just vanish because you plugged your ears slightly or read the text on a screen. The internal processing chain is still under this immense crushing pressure to sort through the chaos.
Okay, when you pull all of these specific mechanisms together, right? The CPU freeze analogy, the unpredictable tennis balls versus the predictable train tracks, the hard limitations of earplugs, it completely shifts the entire paradigm.
It really does.
You realize that auditory overload is not at its core about sensory pain. It's not just a matter of, ouch, my ears hurt, that's too loud. It is fundamentally about governance.
That is the ultimate profound takeaway here, I think. Sound is a governing force.
Yeah.
It governs whether someone literally has the biological capacity to speak at a given moment. It governs whether they will be perceived and read as competent by their peers, by their teachers, or their employers.
It dictates their whole social standing, basically.
It dictates whether they can physically remain in a room or if they have to flee just to prevent a complete system crash. When the processing bandwidth gets overwhelmed by the architecture of a space, that access to language drops completely offline.
The person just goes silent.
And the truly tragic part of this dynamic is that the world looks at that forced silence, that frozen CPU, and mistakes it for an intentional answer.
They think silence means no, or then just assume it means I don't care, or I'm choosing to ignore you because I have an attitude problem.
But as the text states so beautifully and honestly, so devastatingly, it is not an answer. It is the sound of the door closing from the inside.
Wow.
The neurological system has literally shut down the communication ports just to keep the organism functioning.
The sound of the door closing from the inside. That is just a visual that fundamentally changes how you view a quiet person in a loud room.
It really does.
And I think it brings up a very real challenge for you, the listener, as you step back into your own daily interactions after this deep dive. The next time you are in a busy, multi-sensory environment, maybe you're at a crowded family party or a bustling open-plan office or a loud restaurant with those hard, echoing floors we talked about.
Right, anywhere with that intense architecture.
Yeah, and someone seems to be ignoring you. Maybe they are just taking a beat too long to answer a super simple question, or maybe you notice them flinching at some background sound you barely even registered. I really want you to consider what is actually happening beneath the surface.
Because it's probably not what you think.
Right. You might be witnessing a severe neurological bottleneck. You might be watching someone actively trying to survive an invisible architectural assault. You are not witnessing an attitude problem.
It requires a massive shift in how we apply our empathy. We have to stop demanding that everyone's brain process the physical world at the exact same speed, especially when the world we've built is just so aggressively chaotic.
Which leaves us with one final, totally provocative thought to mull over today. If our society's standard auditory architectures, right, the very specific ways we design our shopping malls, our restaurants, our corporate offices, our school cafeterias.
The built environment.
Exactly. If these built environments actively disable people by stripping away their fundamental access to language, what would a public space actually look and sound like if it were designed from the ground up to nurture processing?
That is the big question.
Right. We aren't just talking about dampening the noise with some foam panels. We are talking about actively supporting the brain's ability to locate, sort, and understand sound without having to fight for basic survival.
Imagine walking into a building where you didn't have to brace for impact.
Right. Imagine walking in, and instead of the hum of the HVAC and the scraping chairs and the overlapping conversations hitting you all at 150% intensity, the architecture itself gave your mind a smooth rail to run on. What kind of society could we actually build if we stopped demanding that people merely survive the noise and instead designed physical spaces that gave them the structural quiet they needed to truly speak?